How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to episode 2. Apologize for last week. That went about as bad as it could have for a debut episode. My big two-legger that I went heavy on last week was obviously Pantoja and Merab. Pantoja broke his arm about 28 seconds into the fight. So now Joshua Vaughn is the new champion of the world. We will see what's next at 125 pounds. We could see Tatsuro Taira. We could see, maybe even a really fun one would be Charles Johnson. St. Louis guy here, so obviously always rooting for Charles Johnson. I think he's definitely going to have to win a couple fights before he gets that opportunity. But that would be a fun rematch between Johnson and Vaughn, considering Johnson is the only guy to beat Vaughn at the end of the day in the UFC. He did knock him out. And then, Merab versus Jan. Merab just got outschooled. He got beat down in every facet of that fight. I don't think it was close. Basically, every judge had it in the 49, 46, 48, 47 range. I scored it 50-45 Jan. If Merab can't get his takedowns going and it becomes a striking match, he gets beaten down in those exchanges, especially against a guy who's pretty high level on the feet, and Peter Yan. Jan's takedown defense was absolutely world class. Guess I should have learned from watching tape of that first fight where he was able to stuff a crazy amount of takedowns. Did the exact same thing this time in the rematch. But we live and we learn. The only thing to do is to move on, to make some new bets this week, and to win some money on UFC Fight Night Apex event. We've got Brandon Royval versus Manel Kape. So kicking us off, we have Teresa Bleda versus Jamie Lynn Horth. I'm going to try to be pretty quick on some of these preliminary matchups here, especially ones that I don't really have a lot to talk about with. Teresa Bleda is honestly a pretty decent prospect for women's MMA. Her only loss in the UFC is to Natalia Silva, who could very well be next for Valentina Shevchenko at 135 pounds. She's pretty solid. She's young. She's only 24 years old. Good striker. Good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's going up against Jamie Lynn Horth, who she's, sort of on a back-and-forth run recently. Lost to Miranda Maverick. Beat Vanessa Demopoulos in her last fight. She really finds success in the fights where she can out-physical other women's fighters, where she can sort of be the one who's moving forward, just putting in more pressure and putting out more combinations and more takedown offense. In this fight, I don't really see a path to victory for her. I think Bleda is going to be able to stuff any takedowns and be able to throw a lot of shots, quick combos back at Jamie Lynn Horth. And I just don't see her being able to, really withstand the volume that's going to be coming back at her. So I'm going to roll with Bleda here. If your only loss is to Natalia Silva, who's, in my opinion, probably a top 5 prospect in women's MMA right now, maybe even top 3 prospect, definitely inside the UFC. That's not, counting Dakota Ditchaba outside of the UFC and stuff like that. I would consider Natalia Silva, a good loss. Yes, it was a while ago. She's been pretty inactive. She hasn't fought in 2 years and 5 months. So, this would be an interesting comeback fight for her, but she's only 24 years old. She's taking the time off. Maybe have a little bit of ring rust going in there, but I don't see her having a lot of trouble in this fight. I think that Jamie Lynn Horth was able to, get a lot of her wins by sort of being the bigger fighter against the smaller opponents like Veronica Hardy. She actually lost that fight via split decision to Veronica Hardy. But yeah, I forgot that she actually did lose that fight. That was a close fight, though. She definitely does do better against the shorter opponents. But in this fight, she's going to be the shorter opponent. Blade is pretty big, younger. Seems like a pretty solid prospect. Only lost to Natalia Silva, so I'm just going to roll with Teresa Bleda to get this one done. Whenever you bet on women's MMA, try to be light with it. It's just too volatile. You never know what's going to happen in those fights. The tape is good for Bleda, so I do like her. But yeah, I'm definitely not going to go heavy on that. Next fight up the card, we have Alan Fry versus Guilherme Pat. This is a interesting fight. Two undefeated heavyweight prospects, younger guys. Doesn't have Pat's exact age, but Fry is only 27 years old. He's 6-0, Pat 5-0. I was able to rewatch a couple of Pat's fights. Yeah, I believe his last fight, he went to the third round. In fact, I'm going to tap on this real quick just to make sure I got this right. Yeah, he went to a pretty sloppy third round with Mauricio Chiores in the LFA 1 year and 3 months ago. He did win the fight by TKO in the third round, but the first 2 rounds were pretty sloppy, and this is against an opponent who is now 4-4. So, take what you will there. A sloppy fight going into that. It's definitely not a good look, not being able to get a guy who at the time was 4-3 fighter out in the first 2 rounds. It's not a good sign. It was a pretty sloppy fight. He's definitely sloppy on the feet, has a lot of power, put him out pretty solidly. Alan Fry Jr., on the other hand, there really is not a lot of tape on this guy. I was able to find like a quick little highlight tape on YouTube of some of his finish wins. Looks solid, seems strong, seems like a pretty fit guy. Both of these guys are pretty fit. They're definitely not, like the fatter heavyweights. They're pretty lean. Both tall guys with a lot of power. The Tapology community is siding with the side of Fry. I think I'm going to agree with them here. Fry is actually an underdog. Let's check those odds real quick. Right now you can get Alan Fry at about plus 140 to 142 range, and I think there's some value in that there. Pat's last fight just looked very sloppy, and I think, I could see Alan Fry going out there and just exposing the areas on tape that Guilherme Pat struggles in. So I'm gonna lean with Alan Fry here. This is another one though that's really volatile. There's not much tape on either of these guys, so I wasn't able to really give like a great breakdown for this. But I'm gonna lean with Fry. I think he's got some decent value as an underdog, especially in a matchup where 2 undefeated guys are going up against each other, both making their UFC debuts. So anything can happen. There's some decent value there. So I'm going to roll with Fry and move up the card. Sorry, I can't talk right now. Goodness. Let's see. Next fight, we got Luana Santos versus Melissa Croden. This is an interesting one. I believe, they're both coming off of wins against Tainara Lisboa. Croden sort of had a back and forth with her. She was able to get the finish in the third round. Croden seems like a scrapper. Yeah, that was her UFC debut in her last fight. I believe it was UFC Vancouver. It was honestly a really good fight. Really back and forth. Third round, she really put it on. Lisboa got a nice TKO. This is another one of those fights where I feel like there's some decent value in the plus money side. Let's check those odds here real quick. It's saying plus 140 on Tapology, but yeah, it looks like Croden has shifted quite a bit. She seems to be in the plus 100 to plus 110 range right now. Tapology has it as plus 140. Only 25% of the Tapology crowd is siding with Melissa Croden. I think that is just because Luana Santos does have a lot of experience inside the octagon in the UFC. She is... and also, one more thing I gotta say about Croden, only loss right here on her record, or in her last 5, I should say, is to Jacqueline Cavalcanti, who is actually a really solid prospect in the UFC. So, as far as the Luana Santos side goes, she has great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's the type of fighter who's going to want to get the fight to the ground as quickly as possible. Try to really dominate in the wrestling and the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu department. I don't know how this fight will fare. If Luana is able to get Croden to the ground, she probably will be able to hold her there and can try to work in some submissions. On the other hand, if the fight is standing on the feet, I really do like Croden striking. She seems, to have really solid striking for women's MMA. And, I think that a fun bet for this fight would be for the fight to not go the distance. I don't know what the odds are going to be there. A lot of those odds haven't come out yet. But I do think that, there's value in the Santos submission and there's value in the Croden TKO. So, this is one of those fights where I could see the fight not going the distance. I wouldn't play with the money line here, but it is interesting to point out that, Croden is listed as a plus 140 underdog on Tapology, but when you check the betting odds as of today, she's looking to be floating in the plus 100 to plus 110 range. So that means some money is coming in on Melissa Croden. So do with that as you wish. I probably would be pretty light on this fight. I might put together a nice little women's MMA parlay with just the 3 women's fights on this card. But as of right now, I'm just going to roll with Melissa Croden and fight to not go the distance as my picks for that fight. Moving up the card, we've got Sean Sharaf versus Steven Asplin. This will be a fun one. Asplin making his UFC debut after super fast knockout on the Dana White Contender Series just a few months ago. Yeah, just 3 months ago. Asplin actually used to be, I don't know the exact number, but I'm pretty sure he used to be like 550 pounds. Lost a ton of weight, competing at 265 now, obviously in the UFC. When you see him this weekend, he's obviously really big guy, really flabby, has a lot of loose skin. That's from losing all that weight. So he's got a great story. It's always cool to see a guy who used to be over 500 pounds, lose a lot of weight and make it all the way to the UFC. It's the first time I've ever really seen anything like that happen as a fan. So definitely rooting for Asplin in this fight. And I do think this is a fight that he can win pretty easily. He's got a lot of power in his hands. Still a younger guy. His only loss is to Denzel Freeman, who actually just won a couple weeks ago at UFC Qatar against Arman Tsarukyan, or not against Arman Tsarukyan, against Bulo, the undefeated Polish prospect. But yeah, he got a win on that Tsarukyan versus Hooker card in Qatar. And so, only loss on his record is to a guy who's also in the UFC and just won his UFC debut. So that's solid. Sean Sharaf, he kind of got pushed around by Junior Tafa. And if you lose to a Tafa brother, I'm not going to pick you in the UFC. That's that's a pretty obvious decision in my mind. Tafa brothers aren't that good. They lose fights to good fighters. They win fights against bad fighters. And if you lose to a Tafa, you're probably not the greatest fighter. Not a lot of tape outside of that last fight against Tafa, where Tafa was pushing up on Sharaf. So, if you're getting wrestled by Junior Tafa, right, Junior? Yeah, if you're getting wrestled by Junior Tafa, I'm definitely not going to be favoring you in a fight in the future. So I'll lean with Asplin by KO. I think I'll have some solid value. If you can get Asplin by KO at plus money, that's worth a nice little straight. I really see him putting Sharaf out. Obviously Sharaf got TKO'd by Tafa, so Asplin should be able to get this one done. I'm not going to overthink this one. I'm going to lean with Asplin. He's got a good story. Seems like a cool fighter. I'll be rooting for him in the UFC for sure. Moving up to the next fight, we've got Neil Magny versus Yaroslav Amosov, which is a really, really interesting one. I know when I was getting into the MMA scene, Amosov was talked about as like one of the best fighters outside of the UFC at 170 pounds, if not the best. He's a former Bellator champion who left MMA for a little while. He did have that loss to Jason Jackson where he got chinned in the third round 2 years ago, but sorry about that. But so he got chinned in the third round by Jason Jackson, but since then has come back and got a win on CFFC against Curtis Millender. A nice little anaconda choke. don't remember what round that was in. I believe that was, it was a first round finish in his comebacks. But he left, mixed martial arts for a couple years to take on, the war going on in Ukraine and Russia. I'm pretty sure he joined the Ukrainian forces, and that's what he did for, that's why he left MMA, which is pretty badass. Just saw a video of him came out recently of, him retrieving his belt from his Ukrainian village in, a full army outfit, which was, it was pretty badass, Gotta root for the guy. That's pretty cool. So, Amasov seems like the type of guy who, he's got a lot of experience. He's 28-1 as a fighter. He's been doing this for a while. Obviously had that gap where, he went to serve in the military. Again, badass story. But, since then did come back, fought a pretty lanky guy in Curtis Millender. I was able to watch that fight. Millender kind of has a similar build to Neil Magny. I do have respect for Magny. He's sort of been a prospect killer for a long time, coming off of an extremely controversial win against Jake Matthews, where he sort of, I don't know if he faked it or what, but the ref stopped the fight in the first round, gave Matthews the win. Matthews bounced around the octagon. Keep in mind, this was a 13-leg parlay that I had for UFC Perth that missed by exactly one leg, which was Jake Matthews, who ended up losing by Darce choke in the third round after the ref stopped the fight in the first round as Neil Magny went out, when in reality he didn't actually go out, complained about the stoppage, and was able to get another opportunity. So, Jake Matthews had a big adrenaline dump, obviously thinking he won the fight, then went on to lose it. He tried to go to the commission and report it, but wasn't able to get anything overturned. So, I'm not going to give a lot of respect to that last win against Jake Matthews, to be honest with you. Aside from that, obviously his last two losses are against Carlos Prates and Michael Morales, who may get matched up against each other here soon, which would be a fun fight. Two of the best prospects at 170 pounds right now. So it's going to be tough. I can't really pick Magny in this fight. I just got to lean with Amasov. I think, he's a younger guy, solid fighter, cool story outside of the octagon. Coming over, making his UFC debut, long time coming. Defended his country in Ukraine. Again, that's as cool as a story as it gets, to take a break from mixed martial arts to go defend your country and then come back and have an opportunity to fight in the UFC against Neil Magny. So I'm going to lean with Amasov. He's got great wrestling. I think that's where he wins this fight. I think he can get Magny to the ground, potentially win this fight by submission. I'm probably leaning more towards the decision side, so I will take Yaroslav Amasov by decision as my official pick. I do think he's like a minus 400 favorite right now. Let's check those odds real quick just to double check. He's floating between minus 400 minus 450. If you particularly like Magny, I suppose, I wouldn't talk you down of taking it, especially against a guy who hasn't really fought top-level competition in a couple of years since he left Bellator. But I'm going to lean with Amasov. I think he gets this one done pretty easily. Moving on, next fight we have Joe Anderson Brito versus Isaac Thompson. Now, I know just about as much about Isaac Thompson as you guys do who are watching this video. He was a last-minute replacement of Melsik Bagdasaryan. I think Brito versus Bagdasaryan would have been a fun fight, but nothing you can do about it now. Bagdasaryan, I believe, had an injury, had to pull out of the fight last minute. They got this guy, Isaac Thompson, to step in on short notice. He is only 23 years old, Australian fighter. He's fighting out of Team Alpha Male in Sacramento. Has been fighting in the LFA last couple of fights. is coming off of a split decision. That's the only bit of tape I've been able to find on Thompson, was that split decision win that he had against Islam Boyev in his last fight. This could be interesting. I'm going to stay away from this one from a betting aspect. Brito is 0-2 in his last 2 fights. I do think he could have arguably won both of the fights that he was in, to be completely honest with you. That William Gomes fight, I remember being particularly a bad robbery, in my opinion, at the time after watching it. So he hasn't really had a fair shake recently, but does have a couple of nice finishes inside the UFC with a sub over Jonathan Pierce and TKOs against Weston Wilson and Jack Shore. I think Brito is only like minus 240 in this fight. Yeah, he's between minus 225 and minus 245. I think that that Brito probably gets this one done. Just with the the sheer experience that he has in the UFC. This is a massive step up in competition for Isaac Thompson. Could this guy be the real deal? Sure, he could be solid. Who knows what he's got in in his bag? I haven't been able to watch much tape on him. He's young, hasn't fought on the Contender Series or anything like that. I think that would have been a good test for a guy like him who's been fighting in LFA for the last couple of years. I feel like he would have been a good Contender Series prospect, but who knows? Stepping in on short notice, you got to respect it, especially an Australian fighter, coming in. I mean, I guess he is fighting out of Sacramento, so not too far of a drive or flight from Sacramento to Vegas. But yeah, I'm gonna lean with Brito in this fight. I do think Brito gets it done just with the amount of experience that he has inside the octagon. But yeah, I'd be light on this one. I'd probably keep it simple with that one. I wouldn't throw that as a parlay piece, especially not knowing much about Thompson. So moving on now, we have Jillian Robertson versus Amanda Lemos. This is one of those ones that I'm not going to think about much. Lemos is 38, almost 39 years old, coming off a loss to Tatiana Suarez, who did fight for the belt. That was sort of Tatiana's comeback fight after losing to Zhang Weili. Zhang sort of ran through Tatiana, so she did bounce back with a nice win against Lemos, but I just don't necessarily think that Lemos is the fighter that she was a few years ago. Did beat Mackenzie Dern, who is the current champion 1 year, 9 months ago, but lost to Virna Jandiroba, who Dern just beat. That's, a perfect example of women's MMA being really volatile. A lot of the people who beat each other end up losing to, the same opponents that their opponents have beat in the past. So it's kind of one of those strange situations with Lemos where, the last couple fights she's been fighting some of the best. Lost to Zhang Weili, who just fought a super fight against Shevchenko, then beats Dern, who's the current champion, then loses to Jandiroba, who just lost to Dern to win the championship, beats Yasmin Lucendo, which is a bit of a step back in talent-wise, and then loses to Tatiana Suarez, whose only loss in the UFC is to Zhang Weili. So, she is an interesting one, but dude, Jillian Robertson has been on a run here recently. In her last 4 fights, she does have 2 KO/TKO wins. Started off the run with a KO over Polyana Viana, then went on to beat Michelle Waterson-Gomez in what I think was her retirement fight, I'm pretty sure. Then a nice unanimous decision win over Luana Pinheiro, and then a KO win over Marina Rodriguez in her last fight. I'm going to lean with Jillian Robertson here. She does just about everything right. She's got good striking, good grappling. Lemos is going to try to have a grapple-heavy approach in this fight. I don't really see her being able to get that going. So I'm going to lean with Robertson. She's got finishing potential in both departments. And she's just really strong and solid on the feet. She's, almost 9 years younger. Or she's 8 years exactly, pretty much younger. Almost exactly 8 years younger than Amanda Lemos. So, when you get those 8 to 10 year gaps in fighters, the younger fighter wins at a drastic rate. So I am going to lean with Robertson here. I'm not going to overthink that one too much. And we're going to move up the card onto Bobby Green, King Green versus Lance Gibson Jr. So this is an interesting one. I am not going to refer to King Green as King Green. I'm going to refer to him as Bobby Green because that's who I know him as. And hasn't been winning many fights in his last couple fights. So maybe if he was 5-0 in his last couple fights, I'd call him King Green during this video. But no, I'm going to stick with what I know, and I'm going to call him Bobby Green. Coming off of, he hasn't fought since the highlight of the year last year, which was Mauricio Rufi's spinning heel kick knockout where, he set Bobby Green out flatline cold from a spinning heel kick, which was, if you haven't seen it already and you're watching this video, I'd go look that up on your phone as soon as you can, because that's pretty much as cool as a knockout can be in the UFC. And then before that, lost by triangle choke to Paddy Pimblett, who is obviously fighting for the interim championship now against Justin Gaethje in January on the first Paramount card, which is going to be really fun. I'm excited to break that down. Before that, his last win is against Jim Miller. Jim Miller is one of the oldest fighters in the UFC. 37-17, as you can see, the dude has fought for decades now. Then he got knocked out by Jalen Turner, which was also really ugly KO, where he took way too many excess strikes in that fight. But 2 years, 2 months ago, did beat Grant Dawson. Obviously, Dawson's coming off of a loss, but in between that loss to Bobby Green and the loss that he just had to Manuel Torres, Grant Dawson was on a nice little run, so that has aged decently. That's a nice win. He's going up against Lance Gibson, who's another guy that I don't really know much about. Fought in Bellator for a little while. Since then, he's been fighting in some strange promotion. Let me pull this up real quick just to make sure that I get this right here. Yeah, he's been fighting in a promotion called Muckleshoot Fight Night. So, leaving Bellator to fight in Muckleshoot is a little interesting. I'm not going to rank victories. Okay. I don't know if that's real or not, but this is the first time I'm seeing this. 1 year and 6 months ago, he has a KO win over a guy named Sharon Spain, who is 19-42 as a professional fighter. I'm going to not take too much time away from this breakdown, but I'm just going to look this up. 21-48 overall, Sharon Spain, 37 years old. All right. I'm going to go with Bobby Green in this fight. That's all I needed to see right there, to be honest with you. I don't know much about Lance Gibson. Maybe he's got good power. Bobby's chin is made of glass right now. But, dude, if you're fighting guys who are 21-42 overall as professional fighters, and you're stepping up to fight in the UFC, I'm just not going to pick you. I'm sorry. I can't wrap my mind around that. Yes, Bobby Green, I was just talking about that, 8 to 10 year gap and how the younger fighter wins at a crazy number. Who knows? Maybe Lance Gibson can put a nice strike on Bobby Green's chin and put him out cold. But if he doesn't flatline Bobby Green, I think Bobby Green finds a way to get this one done and gets a nice little bounce back win here because, dude, that competition for Lance Gibson is atrocious. 21-42 is absurd. That's just the step up in competition. I have respect for Bobby Green at the end of the day. He's fighting killers of the division. The guys who he's losing to are top level fighters. Jalen Turner obviously making a big bounce back win against Barboza this past weekend. And then you got Paddy Pimblett and Mauricio Rufi, two of the best prospects at 155 pounds right now. So, gonna go with King Green. Definitely not gonna bet much on that fight. Moving up to, so I guess that was the main card opener. Was the King Green Lance Gibson Jr. fight. So next fight up on the main card is Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Marcus Buchecha. This is an interesting one. Buchecha is like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist. He's coming off of a loss recently to Martin Buday in his UFC debut, which I believe Martin Buday actually got cut from the UFC after beating Buchecha, which is it's either Buchecha or Buchecha. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. He is about to be 36, 0-1 in the UFC now after that Martin Buday loss. Dude has got elite level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's fought as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, professional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist for a long time now. I believe he is a black belt, and his only other loss inside as an MMA fighter inside the octagon is to Umar Kane, who I think still is the one championship heavyweight champion right now. He is a guy to keep an eye out on for potentially making a run to the UFC someday. But yeah, I think I'm probably gonna lean with Buchecha in this fight. And Chukwu, I just can't keep making the same mistakes with him. The dude has zero Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling. He got heel hooked by Walter Walker in his last fight. Tapped instantly. Walker was basically pushing him up against the cage. Jumped to a heel hook. He tapped in 5 seconds. And Chukwu looked like maybe an exciting prospect when he was fighting at 205 pounds. Then he kept losing fights, getting chinned. We're only a year and 8 months out of a split decision loss to Ovince St. Preux. So it's pretty crazy. He's losing to guys that he just shouldn't have been losing to at 205 pounds. Then he made, move up to heavyweight, won 2 fights in a row by KO. Chris Barnett KO was a little fluky because Barnett tore his Achilles right before the fight started. But, it is what it is. He probably would have finished the fight by KO or TKO either way. And then Lucas Bresky, who, not very top-level opponent. Both of those guys aren't very top-level. And then he gets a little bit of a step up in competition against Walter Walker. I bet on Nchukwu. I thought he was going to have a little run at 265. Just wasn't the case. The dude's massive. He's got super long arms. Obviously 6'5". He's going to have like a 3-inch height advantage in this fight. Almost a 7 or 8-inch, it's like 7-inch, reach advantage. But, Marcus has got crazy Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And if he uses that, tries to be as smart as possible just by getting him up against the fence as quickly as possible, getting him down and using that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think he'll win this fight by submission or by decision. With that being said, got to respect the power of Nchukwu coming back at him. He could put him out. He could end the UFC dream, off the jump. I think if Buchecha loses this fight, he'll probably be out of the UFC, especially with an 0-2 start. He seemed like a fun prospect at first, but if you're losing to Martin Buday by decision, and you can't get a submission in that fight, it's definitely not a good sign. But who knows? Maybe he can bounce back, get a nice win here against Kennedy, and maybe have a solid run at 265, which is in desperate need of some prospects right now. So I'm going to go with Marcus there. I'm going to move up and go to Melquizael Costa versus Morgan Charrier. This is a fun fight. Morgan is he's on a fun little run of fights inside the UFC. Last 4 fights, he's 2-2, but they're good fights. Split decision loss against Chepe Mariscal. Then he knocked out Gabriel Miranda, who hasn't knocked out Gabriel Miranda in the UFC? Then a loss to Nathaniel Wood, who I have a lot of respect for as a prospect. I think he's a really good prospect. And then recently, 4 months ago, knocked out Nate the Train Landwehr. So he's on a fun little run. He's only 30 years old. But he's got a tough opponent here. Melquizael Costa is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC right now. I believe, over the last year and 5 months, he's on a 4-0 little run with a submission win over Nerdambike, then a nice sub over Andre Fili, really nasty guillotine. Had Fili in the guillotine for honestly a long time. I was surprised Fili didn't tap earlier because it was a tight guillotine. Bounced back almost like a month later. Had a nice win against Christian Rodriguez, who's a notorious prospect killer. And then beat Julian Erosa in a pretty much like fight of the night style fight in his last fight. Costa's fun. Great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Solid striking. Slightly younger in this fight. Going to be taller with a longer reach. The experience is it's pretty similar between Morgan and Melky Zail, but I'm gonna lean with Melky Zail. I mean, the dude's just fun. He does everything well. I think the Tapology community is agreeing with me here. 75% of the audience is on that, and you can get Melky right now at you can get him at basically a split. I'm seeing -110, -110, -115. So it seems like a coin flip as we speak. And if you're giving me Costa coin flip odds, I'm gonna take him. Dude's a killer. I do have respect for Morgan, but yeah, I'm always gonna take Costa. He's one of my favorite fighters here. Maybe I do have a little bit of bias with him being, one of my favorites in the UFC. But yeah, I'm gonna root for Costa in this fight. I'm gonna pick Costa. I think he does everything right, and I think he's gonna be able to implement his game plan against Morgan and get this one done, either by submission or by decision. Moving up, we got a real fun one here. Cesar Almeida versus Cezary Oleksiejczuk. Cezary Oleksiejczuk, I believe much younger brother of UFC fighter Michael Oleksiejczuk. Polish guy. I'm Polish myself, so I got a lot of respect for the Polish fighters, especially after that Iwo Baraniewski KO this past weekend with one of the best fights I've ever seen as a UFC fan. If you haven't seen that already, go check that out. Iwo Baraniewski versus Ibo Aslan was one of the coolest fights in recent memory in the UFC. Both guys got dropped about 3 times. Iwo ended up winning with a pretty nasty hook and some solid ground and pound. But that's besides the point. Cezary is he's coming to making his UFC debut after winning his Contender Series fight against Theo Hague, where Hague went for a takedown like almost instantly within the first minute of the fight, and Cezary just hammer-fisted the side of his head like 15 times and put him out. And so yeah, lots of power. That wasn't a good showing of the skill that the guy has. He does have a lot of skill. He's a really fun fighter. With that being said, Cesar Almeida, he's a kickboxing champion, coming off of one of the KO contenders of the year, comeback of the year contenders against Abdul Razak Al-Hassan. If Abdul Razak Al-Hassan is about to finish you, that's not a good sign. Yes, he was able to land a disgusting check hook and put him out, but I don't have a lot of respect for Al-Hassan at all as a fighter. I don't think he's very good. And he was winning that fight against Almeida. He almost had Almeida finished. Almeida had a nasty comeback victory, so you got to respect the heart. You got to respect him as a fighter. But, yeah, I don't know. Only loss, I believe, his only loss inside the UFC is against Roman Kopylov, who is a solid prospect. But, yeah, I'm just not going to think too hardly into this one. I'm going to lean with my gut here. I'm going to go with Cezary Oleksiejczuk. Younger guy by 12 years, so a much younger fighter. Not to say Almeida's out of his prime or anything like that. He could have a decent, little run inside the octagon. But Oleksiejczuk, taller guy, slightly longer reach. I'm going to lean with him, and I'm going to take him by KO. I think he's going to put Almeida out, and I think that's going to be a really fun fight to watch this weekend. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to lean Almeida by KO, which brings us to our co-main event, which is a really fun one. Giga Chikadze versus Kevin Vallejos. I'm going to go with Kevin Vallejos here. I do have tons of respect for Giga. I watched his last fight in person out at UFC Kansas City against David Onama. It's a lot closer than the unanimous decision that it was. I feel like a judge should have given that fight to Giga just because he did so much more damage in that fight. Onama definitely won that by hugging. But, the run he's been on recently has a KO 4 years ago now against Edson Barboza. Then a decision loss to Calvin Kattar. Then a nice win against Alex Caceres. And then in the last 2 fights, after a pretty long gap in between all those fights, he lost to Arnold Allen and then lost to David Onama. So, Giga is extremely tricky. He's a really fun fighter to watch. Has nasty striking, super fun on the feet. But this is just one of those one of those matchups where he's just running into a young killer. Kevin Vallejos, he's 2-0 in the UFC since winning his Contender Series bout. There's not much to say about this kid other than he's fun. His only loss is to Gene Silva, who's probably the best prospect at 145 pounds right now. And I'm just going to try not to think too much about this one and lean with Kevin Vallejos here. You can give Vallejos at minus 300. I suppose there is the possibility that Giga can put together a striking masterclass against him and win a decision. But the finishing potential leans all on the side of Kevin Vallejos. So I'm gonna keep this breakdown pretty short. I got respect for Giga, but Vallejos, he's one of the top prospects at 145 right now. Only lost to Gene Silva. Nice run inside the octagon to start his career. And I think this is, sort of that big name win that he needs to really get his career kick-started, get some ranked opponents coming his way. So I'm going to lean with Vallejos, likely Vallejos by KO TKO. And that brings us to the main event, fight I've been waiting for a very long time, which is my boy, Brandon Royval, Raw Dog, taking on the star boy, Manel Kape. Brandon Royval, he does just about everything right. Great striker, great grappler, great jiu-jitsu. He's fun to watch. He always puts on a fight. That last fight against Joshua Vaughn was a banger. Should he have wrestled to try to get the win? Yes, he should have. If he would have wrestled, he probably would have shaken out a decision against Vaughn. I believe he won 29-28 on all the judges' scorecards, especially after Vaughn was able to put him down with the last 15 seconds of the fight. Royval was having a decent third round. Then he got dropped there at the end, which sealed the round for Vaughn. Up until that moment, could have been interesting. May have seen a split decision. Could have seen a judge give one of those rounds to Royval. But nothing you can do about it now except bounce back with a banger fight against another huge prospect at 125 pounds right now, which is Manel Kape. Kape is on, a nice 2-0 streak since he lost a fight to Muhammad Mokaev, which was a lot of controversy surrounding that. Pretty ugly, events leading up to that. And then Mokaev was pulling down his shorts in the middle of the fight and stuff like that. It was just a weird fight that he lost against a guy who just wins by decision over and over and over again. And that's the reason he got cut from the UFC, because he was incredibly disrespectful and not a very exciting fighter to watch. So now he's begging for his job back outside of the promotion. But yeah, I'm not going to hold Manel Kape too much for losing that fight to Mokaev. Since then, has two nice wins. Got the TKO against Bruno Silva, who was a pretty tough opponent at the time. He's not on a great run right now. But and then in his last fight, he did beat Asu Almabayev by KO TKO, but there's some questions surrounding that. He poked him in the eye quite a few times, which was pretty ugly. It didn't look great, and then he was able to sort of follow up the eye poke with a nice KO victory. He's a pretty dirty fighter. Not the nicest guy outside the octagon. With that being said, I may have some bias here, being a big Royval fan, but I think he's going to get this one done. He's really solid at everything. The level of competition that Brandon Royval has had over his last five, it's a step up from Manel Kape, in my opinion. Yes, Mateus Nicolau, not a great opponent, but since then, lost to Pantoja in a great fight. Split decision win over Brandon Moreno. Split decision win over Tatsuro Taira, who may very likely be next for the 125-pound belt. And then a pretty close fight against the new 125-pound champion, Joshua Vaughn, in his last fight. And you can get Brandon Royval at plus 200 to plus 250 on a lot of books. There's crazy value in that. Am I going to use Royval as a parlay piece? No, I'm not. But I'm going to put $25 on this dude as a straight this weekend. There's no doubt in my mind. Way too much value. They have him as plus 175 listed on Tapology here, but on the books, you can get him around plus 240, plus 250. And I'm gonna lean with Raw Dog. The level of competition he's faced is just it's better in my opinion. And I think this is going to be a big step up in competition for Manel Kape, and I don't think he's going to be ready for it. So I think Royval gets this one done, likely by a 5-round decision. I think, both of these guys respect each other's ability to finish fights, and I think it's going to be one of those fights where we kind of see some stalemate, a lot of wrestling. The striking on the feet is going to be pretty technical, and I think it'll be a 5-round decision. So do you like the fight to go the distance? And I also like Royval's money line. That brings us to the end. Got to apologize for last week. Went 9-4-1. The one draw being the Bogdan Guskov-Jan Blachowicz fight. And then my 4 losses were obviously Merab and Vaughn. And then I picked Grant Dawson. He got knocked out pretty cleanly. And I picked Sadikov with some recency bias on my behalf there. And he lost that fight to Fares Ziem pretty easily. Ziem was dominating him and then was able to get the TKO at the end of the second round. So I'm going to apologize for that. Only thing we can do is move on, move forward, bounce back with a nice weekend this weekend. My bets of the week. I'm going to take Royval as a straight. I'm going to put $25 on it just because I love him as a fighter. I think he's got a really good chance to win this fight as a sizable underdog. So I like the value. I'm trying not to, put too many legs into a parlay this time and just lean with a guy that I think can get this one done. And then aside from that, my women's MMA parlay, I'm going to take Teresa Bleda on the money line. I'm going to take the Melissa Croden-Luana Santos fight to not go the distance. And I am going to take the Jillian Robertson money line against Amanda Lemos. And then for my last bet of the week, I'm going to go with Steven Asplin by KO, Joe Anderson Brito on the money line, and Kevin Vallejos on the money line. So hope you guys can ride those with me. Hopefully we can make a little bit of money this week. But yeah, that'll be the end. Thank you guys for the support in the first episode. If you see this and you like this, give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And I'll be back in the next couple weeks breaking down the Paddy Pimblett versus Gaethje card coming up on Paramount. And I'm looking forward to it. So have a great day, guys. Appreciate the love and support. And let's win some money.